at this point to let you know exactly what you have to study and what you have to know. And then next Monday will be lab test number 3. We're kind of limited on some of the models for facial expression. So you'll see there's a head on each table. That's the best I can do. There's nothing around and there's no more TAs to help out, so I don't even know where to get them. Yeah.
So would these be the models then that the exam would be with, or is there like another model that you would pull out for the exam that's like hidden somewhere? I just want to make sure, so like this would be the model we would be tested on?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have it do that.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
I lost my train of thought. Okay, so I'm going to go over some material with you that you have to know, and I'll explain a lot of things. So tonight, we're going to do axial muscles, the muscles that act on the axial skeleton. And we're also going to do muscle histology. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. And that's your assignment for tonight. Tomorrow, we'll do appendicular muscles. And then Friday, if I have not finished any of these topics, you'll complete them on Friday and just review everything on Friday. On Thursday. On Thursday. So it gives us 3 days, which is really more than enough. And the models for the arms and legs are much more plentiful, so that won't be an issue. It's just the axial models that can be a little difficult. Sorry? Nah. You don't want to do that. Don't throw off your bio for it. You don't want that. No, this way we have our pattern. If we throw the pattern off, it's just going to make it difficult for you. And this is the way we've always done it. It's always been the lab and the lecture test. Usually I teach lecture also. This is the first semester in years that I haven't. But in the fall I will be teaching both courses. But we always give them on the same day and try to be consistent throughout the semester. I think that makes it a lot easier for students to, grasp onto. Don't forget to sign the attendance. Okay. So we have 3 types of muscles in the body. We have skeletal muscle, which are attached to our voluntary system. So moving our arms, moving our mouth, blinking our eyes, these are all voluntary functions. So skeletal muscle is voluntary. So some people, especially maybe in high school or elementary, they'll actually talk about these muscles as voluntary muscles. So skeletal muscle or voluntary is synonymous. It's the same thing. And there's a third name that it's sometimes called, and that's called striated muscle. Because microscopically, not on our microscopes, but on higher powered scopes, it has like a striped appearance, zebra-ish, so to speak. And so sometimes it's called striated. So striated, skeletal, or voluntary all mean the same thing. The second class of muscles is called smooth muscle. And there are other terms for it as well. Another term for smooth muscle is involuntary. We do not have any control. These are internal muscles, muscles of digestion, muscles that help to the urinary system or in the excretion systems that we have. These are all involuntary. And there's a third name that we can use for smooth muscle as well, and it's called visceral muscle. So visceral muscles are the muscles that are kind of in the abdominal pelvic region, not externally, but internally. And the third class of muscles is called cardiac muscle. And to my knowledge, there's no other name for it. Or at least no other popular name for it. And those are your three categories. In this laboratory, in 131, we concentrate on skeletal muscle. That's all we're really doing. We're not doing any smooth and we're not doing any cardiac. And next semester at 132, the first topic you will do, if you take that course, will be the cardiovascular system. So normally when I teach it, I will go into the coronary muscles and muscles that line the vascular system. I don't know if all professors do it, I have no idea, but that's what I do. And so you would be doing cardiac muscle and you'd be doing smooth muscle, because next semester you do the cardiovascular and the digestive system as two of the organ systems that you will cover. This semester we only cover four organ systems. That's the skeletal system, the muscle system, the integumentary system, and the nervous system. So those four organ systems are in 131. Reason being is that there's a lot of preliminary work in your lecture class that I'm sure you're aware of, going through all of the chemistries and energy levels, etc., etc. So that's what takes up a lot of time in 131, and it leaves enough time to just do four organ systems. Obviously, in 132, you already have conquered the preliminaries, and you can delve right into the organ systems, and as I say, there are 7 that are left. So that's what you would have in 132. Most people find 132 easier than 131 because you don't have the basic preliminary material that is necessary. It's not going to be much easier, but some people find it a little bit better. Okay, having said that, I don't know why this went off. Let me see that. Is that working? You and you to everybody bring you the rest $1 an hour. So I'm going to give you this handout that's very comprehensive, and we'll be making reference to it throughout tonight and tomorrow and Thursday. Everything in there is not going to be necessary to study. It's very complete. So in the summer, I try to condense it a little bit, only because of the time restraint. So we'll be going over all of that. Where's the attendance list, by the way?
Yeah, I don't think we have it.
Where is it? Did everybody sign? Anybody not?
We need to get. Oh wait.
Sorry?
Oh, I did sign it.
Did everyone sign?
No, I didn't.
Thanks. Okay, anyone else not sign before I put it away? Okay, very good. Okay, so the first thing I want to bring to your attention, come on guys, please. If you turn to the back page, it says cardiac muscle cell. Did everybody see that?
Yeah.
Now turn to the next page in front of that. And it says skeletal muscle cell.
It says smooth.
I'm sorry, smooth muscle.
And then skeletal.
And then turn one more page to skeletal muscle.
Yep.
Okay, so this is your guide, those 3 pages.
Okay.
This is the histology questions that you will be asked. The models are in this box here, so you can just help yourself to it. So this would represent, you can see it's brand new, we just got it in about a month ago. 1903. This is a smooth muscle. Skeletal. And this one is cardiac. So if you look at page number 1, which would be skeletal muscle, it gives you all the things you have to know. Everything is labeled. So the boxes below are 1 through 18, and the models above are 1 through 18. Turn the page. Smooth muscle. Everything you have to know is also there and labeled, as is the last page, which is the cardiac muscle cells. So there will be on your exam Monday probably at least 6 to 8 questions on these histology models. So you start with that tonight after I'm done speaking or whatever you'd like. The second thing you have to know is this model. This is a model of muscle, skeletal muscle. So if you turn to the next previous page, I think it's there. Let me make sure it's the right one. Yes. Picture's not great, but all of the spots are numbered and everything else. And you can see that this is quite complete, and you can see it's the exact, if you look closely, it's the exact model that this is on your handout. You may have a better view. Let me just check. Hold on one second. I'm going to, hello, come on guys. I'm going to see if I can get a better picture which will help you study. I have to look through my material after I'm finished talking to you, and if we do, I'll go upstairs and just make some fast copies for you. All right, so you have the 3 muscles and the histology model of the complete structure here. Have you started to talk about muscles in lecture yet?
No.
Okay. All right, well, that'll be helpful for you. Okay, so that part is done. So remember, the last 4 pages give you all the material you know for the 3 cell models and the histology model. Now let's turn to the first page. This one. So, let's read on. Let's read together. Skeletal muscles. Mr. Young, you have one of these? That's the skeletal. Cool. It says, muscles that you need to know. Skeletal muscles constitute 40% of a person's body weight. I mean, that's significant. Cardiac and smooth muscles account for only a total, in other words, combined 3%. So you can see that the skeletal muscle is obviously the largest. And you know that. I mean, people that exercise a lot, their muscles become very visible. I mean, their arms and legs become, much larger, and their stomach muscles, etc., back muscles. So 40% is skeletal. How are muscles named? The nomenclature of muscles and their action. Okay, so if you want to become a PA, I don't know about nursing, but if you want to become a PA or a nurse practitioner, which means you have to be a nurse first, or you want to go into any sort of doctoral fields in kind of medicine, you will be studying in medical school or whatever school you go to, muscles. And you'll be learning on cadaver, not on these models. And that's totally different. I taught cadaver anatomy at Mercy College for 2 years, I think, maybe 3, a long, long time ago. And it's much more interesting for the students as well as myself. And what do you have to know? You have to know, be able to identify the muscle, number 1. Number 2, you have to know its action. What does it do? And then you have to know the origin and insertion. Okay, so the origin is where the muscle begins, and the insertion is where it ends. Muscles always contract towards the origin. That's an important fact to know. So let's use your bicep, the muscle in the anterior part of your brachial area. And the bicep is right here. So the origin is up in the upper part of the humerus, the lesser and greater tubercle. There's some other attachments in other areas. I don't want to get too specific because we don't have to know that. And then it forms a tendon. A tendon is an extension of the muscles. And the tendon goes down to the radius. Remember the radial tuberosity? So it inserts into the radial tuberosity. When this muscle contracts, it pulls your arm up. So it's a flexor of the arm. It's not the only muscle that does that. We're going to be learning about something called synergy or synergism, when different muscles have the same action. So they're called synergistic muscles. There is something in government called redundancy. And that means that, let's say, there are silos where they keep the missiles in case, we're having a problem with another country or something. So it's not just one silo. It could be 50 scattered all around. It's redundancy. Or there is a computer system that would operate that whole thing, but it's not just one. They may have several different areas or different computers that will do the same thing. And that's called redundancy. In the body, we have many areas that have that. In the brain, there are many areas in the neurological system that can perform the same function. Redundancy, in case you would have a trauma to your brain or a stroke or a bleed, and that tissue becomes damaged. There's other areas that may be able to take over. So redundancy is an important thing. And I just want to make you aware of that. So, also, you would have to know the blood supply and the nerve supply. And it gets very complicated. Here, we don't have to do that. So what are you responsible for? You're responsible to identify the muscle on whatever models that we're going to give you. And you have to know the action. You do not have to know the origin and insertion, even though it's listed on your handout. You do not have to know the nerve supply, the blood supply either. And you don't have to know how it travels. In other words, if you remember when we studied the skeletal system, which was a long, long time ago, which was only, 2 days ago? Remember all those holes in the body, especially in the skull? That's for passage of blood vessels and or nerves. So if you're in a more advanced course of anatomy, you have to know how the muscle and tendon travel as they go through a foramen, or they go through a sulcus or a fissure. But here we don't have to. So the only thing you have to know is identifying and the action. There may be 1 or 2 or 3 muscles that I will want you to know the origin and insertion for reasons that we will discuss when we get there. So sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But if that's the case, I will certainly let you know which one you are responsible for, if any. So let's look at this table right here, the top one. So we have to know some nomenclature. So a lot of muscles are named by their shape. For instance, rhomboid or rhomboideus. A rhomboid is a geometric form. Trapezius, trapezoid. So a lot of the muscles are named according to shape. That's number 1. Some muscles are named according to location. Pectoral, meaning chest, is the example they give. The attachment, the orientation, etc., etc. Or the function. An abductor, for instance, is a muscle that goes through your fingers, called the extensor longa digitorum. So, extensor because it extends. Longus because it's a long muscle. I'll explain that in a moment. And digitorum because it's your finger. Or there's one on the bottom that called the flexor longus digitorum. So we have an extensor and a flexor. We also have going towards the midline, an adductor or an abductor. So there are a lot of different muscles that are named according to their action. And then they give an example on the bottom, and those terms you pretty much know by now, like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, depression, rotation, supination, pronation. You should be quite familiar with that. All right, turn the page, please. Okay, so now we're getting to the part of the course. And the first group of muscles are muscles of facial expression. Okay, so skeletal muscles basically have tendons. And those tendons go to bone. And that's what allows us to move all around, whether it's upper extremity, lower extremity, speaking, breathing, everything. Most of them have tendons, but the face is different. Muscles of facial expression, the muscles actually attached to the subcutaneous, which is the deeper layer of the skin. Well, that's not really true. The skin only has two layers, subcutaneous is below that. But that's where it's attached, or it actually goes to the deeper layer of the skin. Did you learn the integumentary system yet?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
All right, so you know you have two layers.
Yes.
And then the layer below is the subcutaneous, which is not really part of the integument. Are you aware of that?
No.
Oh? Well, it's not. It's separate. But it's studied at the same time because of its close proximity. Yes?
So the face muscles are attached to the deep layer of the skin?
For the most part, that's why you can smile or make all kinds of facial expressions. So all the muscles here on this page, we have to know. It's very important. If you're a plastic surgeon and you're doing a lot of facial work, which they do probably every single week, I mean, that's their bread and butter. You have to really know that perfectly, because if you cut the muscle and the person's walking around with their one side of their mouth lower than the other, they'll be very unhappy. So you got to be really careful if you're doing that kind of work. All right, so let me get that on the computer, and we'll go through each one of those. This material you should be learning in lecture, so I'm not going to go through that. Okay, so 4 terms refer to how muscles work together. Antagonists, they're opposite. So the bicep of your arm flexes your antebrachium. The tricep, which is posterior, extends. So how many people work out in the gym here or have? All right, so if you're going to build up your bicep, you grab a barbell or some sort of equipment, and what do? You flex, right? Because that's the action of the muscle. So as you flex with a weight, you're putting strain on that muscle and it grows bigger, stronger and harder. That's what you want. So how do you exercise your tricep in the back? Well, you pull down. You start here and you going in an extension. There are machines, there are ways of flexing and then extending. They have these type of devices, so you kind of do everything in the same motion. But everybody put their pen down for a second. You take your left hand and put it on your right wrist and make a fist on your right hand, just like this. I want you to pull up with your right hand and push down with your left, so there's no motion. Push real hard. Hold it. So do you feel the muscles contracting? So you're actually contracting the tricep on your left and the bicep on your right. And then you switch. And there was a whole book written on this. It was called Dynamic Tension back in the 50s. And I forgot the author's name, but he said that you could get the same benefit by doing this type of exercise as you would lifting weights or using some sort of machine. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But a lot of people do it because you can travel, you can be in your car if you're parked, and you can go through a whole bunch of exercises for your stomach, for your legs, without any equipment. So it does have a significant place, in our health if you choose that type of function. Okay. So let's talk about these muscles. Let me just see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, so here's synergistic or synergism, and that means antagonists are opposite, synergists are the same. So we will study a muscle called the zygomatic, which is, you're familiar with the zygomatic bone, correct? Remember the zygomatic bone is up here, and then you have the zygomatic arch. And the zygomatic muscle aids you in smiling. And there are two muscles that are zygomatic, a major and a minor. So since there are two, those muscles are synergistic because they perform the same action, but they're two separate muscles. Okay, so let's move on. So this statement is not exactly true. It's a smaller muscle that assists the larger one. Not necessarily. It could be two muscles that are basically similar in size or in function. As long as they do the same thing, we consider them synergistic. Okay, so muscles of facial expression. So the first one is called the frontalis, and the second one's called the occipitalis. Everybody see that on your handout? Okay, so the frontalis is right here, like on your forehead. The occipitalis is where the occipital area would be back here. But they're connected by a band of fibrous tissue, a big fat band on the top of your head. And it's called the epicranial aponeurosis. So we know epi means above, right? So epicranial means above the head, or above the cranium. Aponeurosis, and aponeurosis is a flat, fibrous band that connects two structures. And we have other aponeurosis in the body. So this used to be called the frontalis muscle, and this used to be called the occipitalis. But the more modern nomenclature it's called the occipital frontalis muscle. So this would be called the frontal belly of the occipital frontalis. And this would be called the occipital belly of the occipital frontalis. And if you look at your models, can you hand me that head, please? So you see this gray area on top? So that's the epicranial aponeurosis. And this would be the frontal belly, and this, well, they don't really show it very nicely, because this is not the occipital.
And that's a ligament, Professor?
Sorry?
That's a ligament that attaches them?
No.
No, it's just another muscle?
So ligaments attach bone to bone. So the aponeurosis is a fibrous tissue. Let me bring it over. Well, that one is heavy enough. Anyway, this one shows the occipital belly, which is right here. I don't know if you can hold it up and point to that little muscle there. That's the occipitalis, the belly of the occipital muscle. So when we name it, if I pointed to that on an exam, you would say the frontal belly of the occipital frontalis muscle, and that would be the correct answer. If you call it the frontalis, I won't mark it wrong, but you're not really supposed to do that. Any questions on that? All right, so let's look at the action. So the frontalis wrinkles the forehead, elevates the eyebrows. So we know we all elevate our eyebrows because when you're surprised, you go like that. And wrinkling the forehead is when you're confused. So people taking anatomy and physiology, their forehead is smooth when they start. It's all wrinkled when the time they leave. Okay, the occipitalis moves the scalp backwards. So they move in tandem because the epicranial aponeurosis, when this contracts, it actually causes some movement of the occipital belly. And when the occipital belly contracts, it'll cause some movement here. Yes?
So the two move in tandem.
Sort of.
Okay.
It's not an exact, perfect motion, but there is motion like that. Okay. So that takes care of that issue. Let's go to number 3, the corrugator. Okay, the corrugator, let me just maybe get the other view. Okay, so, see this little muscle here? Here and here? That's the corrugator. It's not a very, these muscles are not that strong. Facial muscles, are relatively weak, but they do what they're supposed to. So the corrugator draws the eyebrows towards the midline as in scowling. So if on an exam, if I pointed to the corrugator and you wrote down scowling, I would mark it wrong. That's not really a very anatomical description. So it moves eyebrows towards the midline would be the correct answer. Orbicularis oculi. Oculi means the eye. So this is the orbicularis oculi going around the eye. It's a circular muscle. And when it contracts, it closes your eye. The next muscle is the nasalis. And you can see the nasalis right here. It flares your nostrils. You ever see a picture of a bull? Like when anybody watch rodeo or... Okay, so flaring means it dilates, it opens up your nostrils. And that's what the nasalis does. So the nasalis dilates the nostrils or flares the nostrils. The orbicularis oris. Oris means mouth. So you can see the orbicularis oris here. And when it contracts, it closes your mouth. Like this. Closes and purses the lips, as in kissing. For those of you that are married or have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you can tell them to watch their orbicularis oris. The levator labe superioris. Nice muscle. Okay. Levator labe, right here. It's deep. It's a relatively long muscle. It goes from the underpart of the eye all the way down to the lip. Levator labe superioris. And it elevates the upper lip as exposing the upper teeth. Like, anybody know who Humphrey Bogart is? No one? Not one person? He was an old-time actor, very popular in the 50s and 60s, and he would always do this. Really? You walk around like that. Yeah, very well developed orbicularis. Lefebvre. Okay. No one ever heard of him?
I looked up a picture and like if you saw a picture of him, they probably know. I looked it up.
Yeah, he did The African Queen. You ever see that movie?
No.
He did, what's that other famous
He
one?
was in Casablanca.
Here's Looking at You, Kid. You know that
Oh, yeah.
famously. All right. So now the next one is the zygomaticus. So here's the zygomaticus right here. So you have a minor, superior, and a major below it. Synergistic muscle. So the minor is smaller in this case. So the zygomaticus elevates the corner of the mouth as in smiling. The Rhizoras. Rhizoras is this thin little wiggly muscle right here, also in the corner of the mouth. And the Rhizoras draws the corner of the mouth laterally. It actually aids in smiling. If you go to a plastic surgeon and let's say your mouth is drooping a little or you don't like that, they tighten those muscles. Actually make an incision and they can either shorten it so that you walk around like a mannequin. You ever see people with their facelift? Really? They don't look real. Anyway, that's the Rhizoras. The next one is the depressor anguli oris right here. Oh, this depressor is down here. So this is the depressor anguli oris. So you know that if it says oris, you know it's someplace around the mouth, correct? So it helps you find these things, just by the nature of the title. So the depressor anguli oris depresses the corner of the mouth as in frowning. The depressor labiae inferioris. Depressor labiae inferioris. It's right here, underneath your mouth. It's a small muscle. It's not very active, actually. And it depresses the lower lip as exposing the lower teeth. And it's really hard to do that because that muscle doesn't function on everybody. I can't do it. Okay, next one is the mentalis. Well, remember where the mental foramen is? Right? It's right here, where the nerve comes out of, one of the cranial nerves. So, the mentalis, and you can see it's a cut muscle, I don't know why. So the mentalis elevates and protrudes the lower lip as in pouting. Anybody ever see the show Full House?
Yes.
That little girl, what's her name? Michelle?
Yeah.
She's walking around this little thing. She's a spoiled kid. Okay. Platypma. Very important muscle. Look at the size of it. This big flat muscle under here, and it actually comes up under your chin and actually even comes out a little bit like here. And when people start getting, too much skin here, as people age, they actually tighten the platypma. That's one of the ways they can get rid of it. Depends how much. Sometimes plastic surgeons actually will cut a chunk of skin out and then tighten it. But you can also, if it's not that bad, you do it that way. So the platypma depresses the lower lip and tenses the skin on the neck. And the last on the list is the buccinator, and that's right here. right here. It's deep. It's a deep muscle. The buccinator compresses the cheeks as in sucking from a straw. So you have to know and identify and know the action of all of those muscles. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And you can find it on the half head, which is this, or just hold that up for a second. We're going to have to just share, or that model there. So 2 tables have a half head, and 2 tables have that, and you just have to go back and forth because I can use either one of these for the exam. Okay, turn the page, please. Yes.
So the front talus, the occipital
Can you talk louder, please?
So the front talus, the occipital talus, like just crossed out. This is. Did you say don't use that word anymore?
Right.
We just use frontal belly, occipital belly.
Well, it's the occipital frontalis muscle. It's just the frontal belly or the occipital belly. But you have to say frontal occipital or occipital frontal muscle.
So one of them is the frontal belly of occipital frontalis, the other one is occipital belly of
The same muscle,
occipital.
frontalis. Do you get it?
Okay. So it was made an
I'm sorry? Okay, turn the page, please. Okay, muscles of the neck. The only one here that I will test you on is the first one, which is the sternocleidoid mastoid muscle. The others are small.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Just the first muscle on the list. It's the only one you have to know. Does anybody want to be a speech pathologist here? Okay, well, if you are, you would take an anatomy course that would concentrate on the head and neck, because that's where your area of expertise is. And you have to know all of those small muscles that attach to the tongue and the larynx, etc., etc. But for our purpose, you don't have to. So the only muscle you have to know is the sternocleidoid mastoid. And here it is right here. So why is it called that? Okay, sterno because there's an attachment to the sternum. Cleidoid because there's an attachment to the clavicle. And mastoid, remember that's the big bump in the back of your ear? Because that's where it ends. So, when the right side contracts of the sternocleidoid mastoid, it moves your head to the right. When the left one contracts, it moves it this way. When they contract together, it allows you to say the no motion.
What those terms mean again in the word?
What terms?
The sterno and the.
Well, it's just what it says. The sterno is from the sternum. Clyde means the clavicle. And mastoid is the mastoid process of the temporal bone. So remember, right, left, together. Okay, turn the page. Okay, muscles of the abdominal wall. Thank you, Betsy. So everybody has a stomach plate on their table. And this is what we'll be using for your exam. So let me go over the muscles with you, because it's important. What actually protects the abdominal pelvic region? Just soft tissue. There are no bones here. It's not like the skull or not like the chest where you have the sternum in the front, the vertebral column in the back, and the ribs joining those. So it makes like a nice protective area for the lungs and heart. medial spinal cavity. Did you study the medial spinal cavity? No? Anyway, so what protects the abdominal pelvic region? Is the muscles that are superficial to the viscera, to the organs inside. And it's a very unique package. So let me show you that. What is this? Stop letting those people touch the cadaverous hand.
That was on the board yesterday too.
What?
It was on the board yesterday too.
Was it?
Yeah, it was during the exam.
Who would touch the cadaverous hand?
Sounds like you know.
Okay. So the first muscle in the abdominal pelvic region, or abdominal muscle, called the rectus abdominis. Rectus means vertical, means straight. And if you'll notice on your plate, there is a band of fibrous tissue that separates the left and right sides. And that's called the linea alba. Linea alba. So, where does that muscle start and where does it end? It starts at the xiphoid process of the sternum, which is right here where my hand is, and it goes all the way down to the pubic region of the coxal bone. That's pretty long. Something has to hold it down. If it wasn't held down, it would pop up. Everybody walking around like they're pregnant. So, you have these fibrous bands that go across. And they're called tendinous inscriptions. Tendinous inscriptions. The tendinous inscriptions and the linea alba, if you are relatively thin and well developed, you will get a six-pack. It's shown that the muscle actually pops up like that. Because as these bands go across, it causes these areas to bulge. But you have to be in very, very good physical shape for it to be visible. I have a six-pack, but you just can't see it. But it's there someplace. Okay, so remember the linea alba separates the two, and that's why when you see somebody that's developed, you can actually see the indentation in the middle. And then you can see the bulges here and here, the six-pack. But do not use that term here, six-pack, because it's not appropriate. So, remember, the rectus abdominis is a straight muscle. It's held down by the tendinous inscriptions and separated by the linea alba. And that's all visible on your abdominal handout. Okay, so this would be the rectus abdominis. And of course, they would be parallel. The next muscle is called the external oblique. What does oblique mean? Does anybody know?
Isn't that like the side of the stomach?
No, and what's the definition of the term oblique?
Just cut?
What's that?
Cut?
No. It means on an angle, a 45-degree angle. So the external oblique goes like this. The next muscle of the abdominal wall is the internal oblique. And it goes the opposite way. It goes like this. And the fourth muscle is called the transverse abdominis. And it goes transversely. So look what I've created here. I've created a grid of collagen in 4 different directions, and that's why the stomach muscles are so strong. And that's why they can protect your internal viscera. Yes?
Are the external and the internal abdominal obliques synergistic?
Synergistic?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one term, yeah, they both can twist your, you could call them that. We don't usually refer to it that way,
Okay.
but they basically do the same thing. They twist your body. There's a machine if you work out in the gym where you're sitting and you're holding a bar, and then the chair rotates. I mean, you rotate it, and you can do this. It's a great exercise. It's really good for the love handles and for the lateral sides of your abdominal area. You just got to be very careful if you're doing those exercises because you can injure your back easily, especially if you start off too quickly. Some people like really don't get a lot of activity and they join a gym and they're doing like crazy stuff, and the next thing you know they're in bed. Really, because they can't move or you have to start slowly. You got to build these muscles up. I mean, you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I work out every day. And one of the things I do is I put a bar in the back of my neck and I twist like this. And the bar weighs about 5-6 pounds. So it actually pulls me. But I've been doing this for years. And it really makes a big difference. It really builds up your strength. So let's look at the action of these muscles that you have to know. Okay, so the rectus abdominis, which is on the bottom, flexes the vertebral column. So how many people here do a sit-up? What are you actually doing?
Flexing the vertebral
You're
column.
flexing the vertebral column, so it's the rectus abdominis that's pulling you up. And that's why it has that action. And that's why you do a sit-up. The external abdominal oblique compresses the abdomen, the abdomen, and laterally rotates. The internal compresses the abdomen and laterally rotates. So when you're doing this, it's your internal and external obliques that are allowing you to do that. And that's what you're actually building up. The more you develop strength in the anterior part of your body, the less chance, I'm not saying it's definite, but the less chance of getting vertebral injury. Because when you have weak stomachs, you're putting all the pressure on your back and it can't take it. So those muscles fail and they can actually pull your vertebral column out of position. And that can be very painful and disabling. So building up your core is very important to your longevity and to have function. I see so many people in my practice, not that old, maybe in their 50s or 60s, that are in terrible shape. Terrible. They don't do anything. You know, they go to work or whatever it is, they get home and they flop down and watch TV, and they get really no exercise. And I'm going to talk to you about a few here and there. A lot of people. It's important that you watch your diet, that you try to stay as slim as possible, and exercise. And I mean regularly. Look, I have a very active life. I've worked 6 days a week in my practice, and I teach, and I still get up early enough. I'm not trying to brag now, don't get me wrong. But I still get up early, and I work out for 45 minutes to an hour every single day. And it helps to keep you healthy. Not that it's a guarantee, but it helps. Okay, and the last one is the transverse abdominis, which compresses your abdomen. So you can compress it, tighten it up, and that's the transverse. Can I have that stomach plate, please? Okay, so here's your rectus. This is your linea alba. This is your tendinous inscriptions. On these models, it's very difficult to differentiate between the internal and external of legs. So if I pointed to this muscle on the exam, whatever you put down either one, it would be correct. And they both have the same action, so it doesn't matter. The transverse, you have to turn it around, and you can see it over here. See the lines on the sides? So that's the transverse abdominis. All right, turn the page. Okay, muscles of the vertebral column. They're all deep muscles. You really don't have any models that demonstrate it. So I normally don't bother you with it. Would you like that?
Yes.
Okay. You turn the page again.
So the spinal ones? For the vertebral column?
Okay, this page we're going to talk about tomorrow. So just turn the page again. We're going to be doing the rotator cuff tomorrow, and I don't want to really get into that. We'll talk about respiration tomorrow as well. Okay, muscles that act on the pectoral girdle. What's the pectoral girdle? You just did it yesterday. What's the pectoral girdle? What does it do? Huh? Pectoral girdle attaches your upper extremity to the axial skeleton. All right, so the muscles of the pectoral girdle. So, the serratus anterior, the pectoralis minor, the subclavius, the trapezius. The levator scapula, you don't have to know it's deep, but the two rhomboids you do, rhomboideus major and minor. So, let's look at the action. The serratus anterior, which is on the side, is yeah, let me get to those. Hold on. Let me just check something. Let me page out. Let me see. Hold on. Oh, we didn't do this. Go back to this page. This is the third page, muscles of mastication. Very important. To masticate means to chew. So we have four. Temporalis, the masseter, the medial pterygoid, and lateral pterygoid. So let's look at those before we go on to the other. Okay, so the two largest muscles to masticate are the temporalis. Temporalis are superficial right here. And that's why when some people chew, their ears wiggle. Look where it's located. So it's right in back of your pinna. And you're really chewing like on a steak or something really, that creates a lot of work, your ears will wiggle frequently. The masseter, right here on the side. These two big muscles elevate the jaw. So when you take a big bite, it's those muscles that are causing it, because it takes a lot of pressure to bite through something. Just think about you go to a deli and you get let's say an Italian Hero, which is one of my favorite things. It's loaded with all kinds of meats and cheeses and vegetables, and it's thick. And it really takes a lot of power to bite into it or through it. So these two muscles are very strong. Anybody ever see a pit bull? You ever see the cheeks on the pit bull like this? That's all masseter. That's why the pit bull has such a tremendous biting power. I think it's something like 700 to 800 pounds of pressure. And if they bite on something and don't open their mouth, you can't physically open it. You can't pull it apart. That's what makes them so dangerous. Because most of them are really nice dogs. I mean, I've known a few, and they're really great animals. But some people just abuse them or train them to be mean. But their biting power is so tremendous, and that's what makes them dangerous. And if they grab onto you, you're not going to let go. And you can't do anything to separate it. Nobody's strong enough to pull their jaws apart. So anyway, that's why they have those big jowls on the side. Their masseter is enormous. So, both of those elevate your jaw. Now the paragoids, we don't have any models of that because they're deep. But you still have to know it academically. So you can see the lateral paragoid and the medial paragoid. So there are two of each. The medials are in a rectus position, and the laterals are horizontal. And let's see what they do. So the medial paragoid depresses the jaw. It helps open it, which is very easy because gravity is working with you. And it moves the jaw laterally. You ever see a cow chewing? It goes like this. It grinds and moves back and forth. They have very developed paragoid type muscles, a little different than ours, of course. The lateral paragoids protract the jaw, like move it out. And when you're grinding, you're actually using both of the paragoids. So the cow, which only eats, because it's not a meat eater, it's not carnivorous, only eats like grains and grasses and whatever else. So it does this, grinds, because the teeth doesn't have incisors like we have to bite into something. All the teeth are very flat, so it acts like a grinding wheel. It just does this. And whatever product or substance it's eating, it just grinds it up into like well, it's not a powder exactly, but it's a very, very fine structures. Okay, so now let's go to the last page. The muscles that act on the pectoral girdle. Okay, so let me get to that on the screen. These are the small muscles that were on that page that I said forget about. Just look at them. I mean, it's really not in our position to have to learn this. But if you went to speech pathology or if you become a dentist or something like that, you have to learn these muscles because they're in your area of expertise. Here's a picture of the abdominal muscles. You can see the tendinous inscriptions. You can see the linea alba. All right. So if you look on the side, the serratus anterior is right here. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 muscles on the side. And here again, if you're very thin and you work out, you can actually see these ripples over here. And that's the serratus. The serratus pulls the scapula forward and downward. Remember, these are muscles of the pectoral girdle, so it would be attached to the scapula. Pectoralis major and minor, only the minor is here. So where do we find that? Let me pull out these muscles, but I should have. So let me. Excuse me. So if you look at the posterior aspect of the pectoral area, this is the the spine of the scapula here. And above it is, remember there are two fossas here? Supraspinous, infraspinous, remember? This is called the suprascapular, and then the infraspinatus, the supraspinatus, and the infraspinatus, which we'll learn tomorrow. You don't have to know that now. But the minor is right here on this model, pectoralis minor. And we'll be talking about the rotator cuff tomorrow. So you would need this model to really see that. I'll put those out as well. Subclavius. Remember the fossa on the anterior surface of the scapula? Subscapularis, remember the subscapular fossa? So the subscapularis draws the clavicle downward. The next one is called the trapezius. Big, can I see that? Please turn that around. A little, no, the other one. Turn that around so I can see the back. All right, well, doesn't really demonstrate it greatly, but this is the trapezius here, and you can see it here coming all the way down. Big, strong muscle. Anybody play football here? You ever see a football player that got these huge necks? Because they developed their trapezius. And the reason they do that is because instead of a contact sport, you can fracture your vertebra in the neck area. So if you're doing shoulder shrugs, like if you have a weight here and you're doing this, it develops your trapezius. And they do a lot of that, and that's why they have such strong necks. And it really helps protect them when they're playing that, pretty brutal contact sport. So the trapezius elevates, depresses, and adducts the scapular. Then the two rhomboid major and minor, they do the same thing. They elevate and adduct the scapular. So let me see if I can find. Can you turn that around, please? No, a little bit, but it's not good. I'm trying to remember the model that we used for that. Well, let's leave that for tomorrow. Let me just show you up here. It's a posterior muscle, so I have to turn this model around. And here's your rhomboids. This is your minor, and this is your major. So they're superficial, they cover the serratus, or part of the serratus muscle. This is the rhomboids. And we have a model that demonstrates, I just can't remember what it is. Well, we'll do it tomorrow. Okay, I think that's all for tonight. Let me just see if there's anything else. Okay, muscles that act on the brachium, that will start tomorrow. So, you have all the facial muscles to study. Muscles of mastication, sternocleidomastoid muscle, I'm sure you know that. Muscles of the scapular region or pectoral. So that's it, yes.
And will we need to know the eye muscles?
Yeah, that's for the next, it's in here, but we study that when we do the eye, which is next week.
Oh, okay, got it.
That's lab test number 4.
Okay.
Did you find out when your lecture test number 4 is?
It's on Monday.
On Monday. All right, so what we'll do is lab test number 4 we'll do on Tuesday.
Great.
Okay? That way it gives you a little break so you can study. And I mean, it's your choice. We can either have a lab class on Monday, I'm talking about not next Monday, the Monday after, or you can skip it if you want to take that time to study. But how many people would want to skip lab on Monday and then have the test on Tuesday? So raise your hand high. How many people want to stay, have the lab class? 2.
Like to do a review?
What's that?
Like to review for Tuesday?
I can't hear you.
To review for Tuesday?
When?
That Monday.
You could come to class if you want. I mean, we're not going to have a review. You just can study here. There's nothing to review. I mean, we're going through everything. All right, you can be able to make a decision now. When we get closer, if you want, listen. I'll be here if you want to come. If you don't want to come, I'm not going to be here. So we can either blow Monday off and then meet on Tuesday for the exam, or if you want to come Monday, that's fine. So you'll decide when we get closer. All right, so don't forget to study these things too. All right? And study this. In the meantime, I'm going to look for a better picture for this, and I'll make some copies if I can find it. Okay, what time is it? Sorry?
7:51.
Good. Wow. All right, so you have 25 minutes or so. So try to make good time. Everybody got a handout?
We're debating on if that Monday come in if we want to, but we have to let him know because if we
Anybody else need a handout?
yeah.
For the last week, we literally don't have anything.
It's online, right?
Just take them back to your desk. Just take, you know, listen to me. Can I leave you guys for like 5-10 minutes to make coffee?
Of course, thank you.
Will you all be here when I get back? Please, if somebody walks in, just say I had to make these copies, there's nobody else to do it.
I think these might be the same. These are the selections. Because I'm looking at the picture of the project and so this one for sure is smooth. And the picture just looks like there's like a...
Yeah, they were the same.
Well, I think
The
it's-
rest of those spells. Yeah, they got that same.
Petrolis minor.
Oh, yeah.
It's that one.
Doesn't it use something else? Provided nothing that matches
In the Bryson, the tab I see that has like pictures on the two.
Yeah,
And there's like a bunch of slides, so this is only two. It's like labeled most of mine. It just looks a lot better than the
I've been checking it. I thought you get a notification, but
You know what? I tried to sign up for that app, and I like wasn't able to do it. Like it was giving me problems. Like it was telling me like I don't have the password and all that stuff. So I guess it doesn't want us to be on the inside of it.
not. I'm looking. I keep checking.
all of that, no, you need to know exactly.
Did he post them the next day? Last time? He might be waiting for his grade. He said that he was waiting for his grade last time. Hopefully, hopefully that's not what he's doing.
Wait, what happened?
He needs his grade
For what?
because he says that he was trying to average it already in the beginning. Like he got
Like for the end of the semester. You know, for the end of the
Only the
semester,
end?
you need it. Yeah, you don't do it till the end. No, you don't. You wouldn't.
But then he gets test one is the average full test, right?
I think it's just all 8 of them are average. They just average all 8 together. Right now. It actually, truly, yeah, no. I think they just average all 8 together. What?
I said 8 should be enough to fill.
Yeah. So where's that muscle picture on?
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a nice copy, so just pass it around.
Oh wait, this
Take one, please.
I'm gonna go to the library. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna go to.
Wait, that's what this is. That's crazy. Is everything big?
Sorry, I asked what it was to buy across.
You're talking about the Companion, like
That's where all the models are.
Wait, so this has been, you've had this?
I mean, I found a lot of that.
And then there's black Sam Green.
Wait, actually, that makes me so mad.
Are there any copies left over?
This makes me so
I think the first one is the one. Yeah, the first one is
Make sure you study that model that I just gave you the handout on. I only have one, so maybe I hold on.
We're gonna only be on the exam for maybe 3 or 4 questions max.
The only one, so let me share it. No. Yeah, I did the other one.
Not the worst one.
Of course. Yeah, whatever you want to do. No, not a problem.
You guys have a better one than I do.
Yeah, of course. You could take it if you want and write it back. It's up to you.
It's okay, I'll just take pictures. Oh, they pull apart. So sorry to be in your way.
I'll try to have your grades on Thursday.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. The model has it on.
They just have to use it to make it work. I just said
That's not. The what? Corrugator is the eyebrow.
Doesn't show up. Yes, it does.
And are these the same as these?
This is a new model.
Stack low, 5 waivers, 6.
Oh, the circle flag.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And what about these?
Same thing.
And is this something, by itself?
Yeah, it's should be with that.
So the inside says it's the axon, and the outside says it's the myelin sheath, or it could be outdoor.
No, the axon is the nerve. The myelin sheath is what covers the skin.
Oh, this is the myelin sheath, and that's the axon? It is, yes. So this is also a short stuff.
This one do tomorrow.
So is this individual blue stuff, does that agree on?
This is a new model.
So you're looking at the plan, this one here, this shows this little area, and it shows you just want transfer studio. And then the circle,
Arco limb, I believe.
shows it as
No, almost done with like this. And then I was not scared. I already got it.
Yes.
This is just like
these that are a little lighter, or it says, are active filament, do you want them to sit or would you?
No. The axon
I just want to make sure that it's like, and the staff review, you wouldn't ask, which is the line, right?
the attachment to my original. Oh, really?
And so then the nucleus and the satellites are you?
Well, that's good.
And the satellites are also the outside of the nucleus?
So the whole thing is a satellite. That's the nucleus of the.
Okay.
So
Would we write Myo satellite the same as one? Okay, that's
Done out of the. So one is in all these things, a lot of names attached to it.
So if I wrote Schwann cell, do you prefer that?
Yeah.
It's one, either one.
Yeah.
The motor actually had a nerve that they were using the way to ask their.
No. Listen, before you leave, the class coming in, I don't think is on muscle. I think you're still doing bones. So you have to help me clean up. So the mop and pails in the other room. Get your Number 6. Okay, the inflated disc is important. That's important. That's what speaks to the heart muscle. It's related. All right, listen, it's almost 14 after 8, so let's clean up. Please put everything on the radiator someplace. The torso's going here, the head's going where the heads are. Histology model.
We have, like an understanding of what all these muscle actions are. Do you want to know the exact definition when you ask that? Okay. So you might say,
So we're about point to a muscle, I say name, and then the next question I say name its action.
okay. And then also, do you want to know an example or no?
What does that mean?
Like an example of section would be a bicep. That would be just Or you can go on to 11.
I think it's going to be
10 is long.
maybe half the time tonight and then 11. So half the time.
I felt like, I know you guys said, I don't know why. I don't think I understood the like, I kind of like figured myself out.
That is annoying.
Do you have extra points if you can see the erase mark?
No.
Half a point.
What's more annoying is that somebody finishes in 10 minutes for a 70 test question.
But honestly, at the same time,
But that means they do well.
Right.
depending, sometimes if someone just doesn't know any of the answers, they just,
They just fill in.
yeah, you know?
So they should get a 25, like 1 out of 4 chances. Is there E on the choices, or just
Yeah, that was from me.
Yeah.
20% chance that you get it right?
Honestly, I think having E makes it easier. Like having, and for some reason, having the extra option, I just feel like.
Yeah. More questions make it easy too, because they're not worth as much.
Yeah.
I think the last test is going to have more questions because there's going to be more material. It'll be like 90 questions.
Oh, wow.
95.
Basically, like almost like a point. You know, it's awesome.
Oh, that's nice.
So you didn't get back your lab practical number 2, right?
No.
Probably not till Monday.
I don't know if I wanted that.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
Was it harder than the first one?
Terrible.
It was not hard. It was because he did not really explain what was going to be on each thing. So we had to study a lot more than was necessary.
Right.
And yeah, if
So
I
now you're doing muscles, right?
yeah, and he gave like a very descriptive packet for muscles. So I feel like it's going to be easier just because we know what to
Oh,
study.
that's good. Yeah. That's good. What's that?
I think he's had this for a while, though. I think that's just so like he keeps it.
Also in a semester, he has weeks to do the bones. He had like 4 days to do it here.
Yeah, like, and he probably like would have pops out to do different things, and like now, like he would like have like 1 week out.
Yeah.
Also, mind you, all the role models.
When does he have office hours?
I don't know if he does. He works like 6 days a week, I think.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he works 6 days a week. He said.
Wow.
He works out every morning.
And he works out every day.
He works out every day?
Yeah.
Wow. I do it 3 times a week,
Yeah.
as of 2 weeks ago. Got to start sometime.
Yeah.
I don't want to get turkey neck.
He actually spent a lot of time talking about the neck and exercising the neck today.
Is that right?
And that we need to all eat healthy.
And you need what?
To eat healthy.
He
Yeah.
seems like, very health conscious.
He was definitely like rampant today. No, he's fine.
I annoy him so much. I ask him every question. I have, by the way, if you want it, I know what you don't need to know for this. He told me that he's not asking me.
Are you sure?
He literally said they're too small and I will not ask them.
I'm doing it too.
So it's less that you have to study.
I just like don't know if I don't know. I'm still gonna know the other things. I just
He's never like tricked us though. He was like, this is too small, I'm not gonna ask it. He's like, I'm not gonna ask any of these things in here. Not gonna ask this. He said, would you really, he said he's only gonna ask 2 questions on this. And honestly, he pointed to this 3 times, the axon, so I think that's gonna be it.
Yeah, small muscles are difficult.
And like, I think the main thing here, and the axon I'd focus on.
Do you know what the smallest muscle in the body is?
No, he didn't tell us that yet. I know the bones. The ear bone.
Well, the ossicles, right? The smallest bone.
Yeah.
The stapedius muscle. It attaches to the ossicles.
So it's basically the same.
It dampens the sound. So you don't get noise.
I feel like he's definitely going to ask about this internal navigoid.
Definitely. It's the
Keep in
only one.
mind when you turn your head left, contract to the right and opposite, and then
Yeah, he'll ask this.
So wait, so when you turn your head to the left, the muscles
the
contract
right
to the
muscle,
right?
when you,
Yes.
yeah, it's, so it's
Oh, I
like
didn't realize that.
opposite, and he did say
I'm
it,
gonna write
and
that
then,
down. Okay.
and then when they both contract,
It makes
it's
the yes.
up and, yes.
The yes
It's
motion.
What he calls it the no motion.
So the opposite contracts for the opposite
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
I've got a smartwatch on now. And it tells me I haven't moved enough today. It's making me feel guilty.
We have so many people come into the emergency room because of those things and think that their heart rate is like 20 because it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
reading it right.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, it turns out it's like 70.
Wow.
Like, that's like
Mine's 60,
nothing.
58, 60,
Mine's like 50s, yeah.
50s.
But I run a lot. But yeah, it's very low.
Yeah, that's good.
I used to think that was bad, but they say it's not bad. So.
No, it means you haven't had drugs.
I was like, it's going to stop eating with it.
If you work out a lot, if you don't work out, I think it's not great for your diet, like, it's like low.
If you don't work out a lot and it's low, it's
Yeah,
not
like,
great.
it's kind of like not great.
If it's
Yeah.
25, that's bad. That's barely compatible with mine.
After I had my kid, mine went into the 40s.
Yeah, it's
The
low.
bradycardia after pregnancy is, I guess, for a couple weeks. That's a common thing they said. Because it
Really?
came back up. Yeah, it's from the hormone.
Yeah.
And then it comes back up after a couple weeks. But it was scary. It would like dip into the mid
Did you
40s.
feel it?
Yeah.
What did you feel?
I just felt like lightheaded, yeah, when I stood up and stuff.
Did you ever faint or pass out?
No, but I didn't feel great. I would almost hear my, like, it almost felt like I would hear or feel like this thing that was like an irregularity, like, you know, you hear your heartbeat in your head a little bit?
Yeah.
Almost like I would, beats weren't normal. It almost thought I had like an arrhythmia. It scared me, but they said it wasn't, that it was just slower.
Wow.
But it didn't last long, maybe 6 weeks, 5 weeks.
How many kids do you have?
2.
Boy and a girl?
2 girls.
2 girls. How old are they?
5 and 9. My little one didn't talk till she was almost 5, so
Really?
she just finally learned how to talk this year. So it's good. Now she talks about everything.
Can't shut her up.
Now she says, I'm a chatterbox. But yeah, she was.
Do you know what the first word a child learns? Mama. Do you know what the last word an Alzheimer's patient remembered? Mama. The last word they remembered, mama. They kind of go back into infanthood.
My kids always said, da, 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 da.
Yeah. Did you make your kids promise they won't put you in the nursing home?
Yes. And I remind them they were 10 pounds and that they own it
There you go.
all the time. My older one was gigantic.
Yeah, my pulse is 61. It will tell you if your pulse is irregular, if you have atrial fibrillation.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Does it do blood pressure?
No. I'm not sure if there is a watch that does blood pressure. I don't think it's that advanced.
Not yet. Soon enough.
They have watches with pulse oximeters.
Oh, yeah.
Next time you see your lab professor, tell him to come in.
He said he was going to email you because our grades, he couldn't get them to work online, so he just told us our grades.
Oh,
So he said he was going to reach out to you, right? Did you say that?
Yeah.
yeah.
To give you the grades.
Oh, okay.
But I
That's
don't know if
good.
he's done it
It's
yet.
like we know them, it's like, that helps you.
Yeah.
We'll just tell you our grades.
You'll just make it up. You know how I was telling you that there was a brother circus? We had a brother that used to cut the grass, and we used to call him Brother Tractor. We were cool.
So they're all trying to help you.
That's better. So when you lift weights, do you increase the number of muscle fibers? How many people say yes? Raise your hand. How many people say no? What happens to the muscle? What's that? It gets wider.
Oh, so they just get stronger or bigger in the cells, you don't increase the amount?
You don't increase the number of muscle fibers. You increase how fat the muscle fibers are. You increase the number of mitochondria. You increase glycogen stores. You increase blood flow to the muscle. All those things make muscles stronger. And it's good to take a break from working out like every other day to allow your muscles to heal from the strenuous activity. It needs to heal. If you do the same exercise every day, you're not allowing your muscles to heal. Okay, so let's get started. The traditional roll call. Yassine?
Here.
Viviana?
Here.
Gabriella? Naya?
Here.
Nicole?
Here.
No problem. Christine?
Here.
Destiny? Nohemi?
Here.
Michelle?
Here.
Jennifer?
Here.
Kyle? Jacqueline?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Jasmine?
Here.
Joseph? Ashley?
Here.
Justin?
Here.
Gabrielle?
Here.
Christy?
Here.
Louis?
Here.
Arthur?
Here.
Brianna?
Here.
Desiree?
Here.
Anybody's name I didn't call? Okay. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about muscle tonight. The three types of muscle, what are they? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Why is it called smooth muscle? There's no striations. Very good. So we already talked about the three types of muscle. Muscle tissue are cells that are specialized. Oh, I don't have the projector on. That would help. So we talked about the types of muscle. Muscle tissue are cells that are specialized for contraction. Skeletal muscles move the body by pulling on bones. Cardiac and smooth muscles control movements inside the body. Some common properties of muscle is excitability. responsiveness to nerve stimulation. Contractility, the ability of cells to shorten. Extensibility, the stretching of the muscle. Elasticity, the recoil of the muscle. Functions of skeletal muscle: producing movement, maintaining posture and body position, supporting soft tissues like your abdominal muscles. What are the abdominal muscles?
What are they called?
Yeah.
Obliques.
External oblique, internal oblique,
And the rectus.
rectus abdominis. What's the one deepest?
He said we don't need to know those ones.
Transversus abdominis. It guides, it guards body entrances and exits. It acts as sphincters. It maintains body temperature. Remember, shivering raises your body temperature. It stores nutrients like glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose. Skeletal muscle contains skeletal muscle tissue, primarily, connective tissue, blood vessels, and nerves. There's 3 layers of connective tissue around muscle: the epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. The epimysium surrounds the entire muscle. It separates the muscle from surrounding tissues. The perimysium surrounds muscle fiber bundles called fascicles. Bundles of muscle fibers are called fascicles. They contain collagen fibers, elastic fibers, blood vessels, and nerves. So perimysium surrounds a bundle of muscle fibers, a fascicle. Endomysium surrounds individual muscle cells, which are also known as muscle fibers. Now, we're talking about skeletal muscle. You notice in purple above here, it says organization of skeletal muscle. So we haven't talked about cardiac or smooth yet, so we're limiting ourselves to skeletal muscle. Now, the endomysium surrounds individual muscle fibers or cells. What's the longest muscle in your body? It's in the leg, the sartorius. It's almost 1.5 feet long. That's one cell, 1.5 feet long. It contains capillary networks, myosatellite cells, which are stem cells that repair damage, and nerve fibers. Collagen fibers of the epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium come together at the ends of muscles to form a tendon, a bundle, or an aponeurosis, a sheet. It attaches skeletal muscles to bones. So here's the epimysium surrounding the entire muscle. Here's the tendon. And if we look at these little red dots, those are muscle fibers. Let's take a look closer. So this is a perimysium. These are muscle fibers. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 muscle fibers in this perimysium. These are individual muscle fibers. The endomysium surrounds an individual muscle fiber, and some structures that exist is the sarcolemma, which is the plasma membrane of the muscle cell. Nucleus, there's a bunch of nuclei in skeletal muscle. The myosatellite cell, which repairs damaged muscle, and myofibrils, which we're going to talk about in a second. Did you guys discuss myofibrils? No.
Is there a standard amount of muscle fibers, like for certain muscles, like in each, like you know what I mean? Like do certain muscles have certain amounts, so then like for
Yes.
each like standardized?
I don't know if it's standardized. It varies from individual to
Okay.
individual. But the eye muscles have fewer muscles than your thigh muscles.
Okay.
Yeah, they have fewer muscle fibers.
Okay.
Skeletal muscles have extensive vascular networks that deliver oxygen and nutrients and remove metabolic waste. They only contract when they're stimulated by the central nervous system. They're often called voluntary muscles. Although the diaphragm is a skeletal muscle, it works usually subconsciously. So you don't normally think about breathing and flattening your diaphragm. You can do it, you can flatten your diaphragm if you consciously think about it, but as you're speaking and breathing and sleeping, your diaphragm goes up and down, because of activity in the brain called the medulla oblongata. That's the respiratory center in the brain, part of the brainstem. Who here watches Grey's Anatomy? Is it any good? I just watched the first season. I haven't seen it yet.
I would only say to go up to like season 9, and then
There's 9 seasons?
there's like
Like
20
9.
seasons, but it falls off after like season 9. Like,
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that when what's his name dies?
It becomes trashy after
no,
season
yeah,
9.
yeah, no.
It becomes trashy.
I mean, every episode is so tragic.
Every episode is like
It's
sad.
tragic?
Yeah, be ready for like to be crying for like every episode.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Should I watch it with my wife?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, I'll do that. That'll be our Saturday night date night. We like to go out to dinner on Saturday nights.
You can watch this afterwards.
What's that?
You can watch the Grey's Anatomy afterwards.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Usually we go to the early bird special before the crowds get there. We went to the Dirty Tequila Taco.
Dirty Taco. Yeah,
What was
this is
it?
great. Dirty Taco.
Dirty Taco, yeah. We went there. It's loud in there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't hear myself.
If you go on a Friday or Saturday night, it's definitely loud in there.
Oh, yeah, Saturday
If
night.
you go during the week, it's not so bad.
It's not so bad.
No.
Yeah.
Certain locations too.
Yeah, true. It depends on the location you went to.
I get a Virgin Bloody Mary. I like virgins. No, I'm just kidding. My sister would be a virgin 3 times. No, I'm just kidding. I just made that up. Skeleton Well, we're on a roll here. How do you make a hormone? I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Somebody can tell you after class. Skeletal muscle fibers are enormous compared to other cells. They contain hundreds of nuclei. They're multinucleated. They develop by fusion of embryonic cells called myoblasts. They're also known as striated muscles due to the striations or stripes. Striation just means stripes. So it starts off as myoblasts, which are stem cells. The satellite cells are also associated with the muscle. Then an immature muscle fiber with multiple nuclei. And here's a mature muscle fiber. Notice the striping, the striations, multiple nuclei, myosatellite cells that repair damage. And the length can be up to 30 centimeters. Now, I'm not good with the metric system. I always need to know inches. I can't think in centimeters. Can you think in centimeters? And how about kilometers an hour? Can you think kilometers an hour? So these are the striations, the multiple nuclei. This is a light microscope view of the striations. They really do exist. And it's alternating light bands and dark bands, which we'll see in a moment. The sarcolemma is the plasma membrane of the muscle fiber. It surrounds the sarcoplasm. I feel naked without my phone. You ever leave your phone somewhere and you feel naked? You have to go back and get it at all costs? Or you think you've lost it and you go crazy? Or drop it in the toilet and it feels like you had a stroke. It surrounds the sarcoplasm, which is the cytoplasm of muscle fiber. A sudden change in the membrane potential. I hope none of these are very dark. Sudden change in membrane potential initiates a contraction. What's a membrane potential? It's a fancy way of saying something. What's a membrane potential? You've heard the term, right? How many people have heard the term membrane potential? Raise your hands. How many people have never heard the term membrane potential? It's an electrical impulse. That's all it is. It's an electrical impulse. Why don't they just say that? Electrical impulse. That's so intuitive, electrical impulse. You stick your finger in the socket, you get zapped. For those of you who are parents, do you put guards on the sockets so to keep your child from sticking their tongue in the socket?
Or the keys.
Or the keys. Transverse tubules are tubes that extend from the surface of the muscle fiber deep into the sarcoplasm. What's the sarcoplasm again? The cytoplasm of the muscle. It transmits action potentials, think electrical impulses, from the sarcolemma deep into the interior of the muscle cell, muscle fiber. Action potentials trigger contraction. So the electrical impulse triggers contraction of the muscle. If muscle loses a nerve, it atrophies and goes flaccid. So if you cut the nerve going to a muscle, it would shrink and it would become loose, flaccid. So it needs nervous stimulation to remain contracted. And it always stays at a certain level, which we call muscle tone. It's always contracting a little bit so that you can increase the contraction or decrease the contraction. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, that sounds like what? Endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth, like the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. It's a tubular network. It forms chambers called terminal cisternae that attach to the T-tubules. Two terminal cisternae plus a T-tubule form what's called a triad. You'll see what that looks like in a second. So the sarcoplasmic reticulum is specialized for the storage and release of calcium ions. Now, we need calcium in order for muscles to contract.
What are those two things equal again? Sorry?
What's that?
What are those two things equal?
Triad. Two terminal cisterna and a T-tubule. You'll see it in a picture in a second. Let me jump ahead and show you. Here it is. Here's a triad. T-tubule, which has holes to the exterior of the muscle, the sarcolemma, and the terminal cisternae on either side, and this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is filled with calcium. When the electrical impulse travels from the muscle down into the T-tubules, it causes calcium to be released from the terminal cisternae, which then leads to muscle contraction. We'll study that in a moment. Myofibrils are lengthwise subdivisions within a muscle fiber, and they're responsible for muscle contraction. They're made of bundles of protein filaments called myofilaments. Are you getting confused? Myofibrils, myofilaments? thin filaments, thick filaments. Thin filaments are composed primarily of actin, a type of protein. Thick filaments are composed primarily of myosin, another type of protein. So this is one muscle fiber, and these are myofibrils. Now, when you lift weights and your muscle gets fatter, you increase the number of myofibrils. So the muscle stretches and becomes larger, and you can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Although I don't think he looks like he used to look. But he's like 80 years old now, so we'll give him that. And Sylvester Stallone still looks good, but he's 80 years old. I don't know how old he is.
Did you say the myofibrils increase?
Yeah, the number of myofibrils increases in trained muscle. How many people here lift weights? Raise your hand. Fair amount. How many people run? Raise your hand. Good. How many people use a treadmill?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. If it's raining,
I have to.
Yeah. How many people walk their dogs? Okay, that's what I do. I walk my dog. I can't run because I have bad knees. I can't use the treadmill either. I can use an exercise bike, and I can use a Stairmaster, but it doesn't fit in our basement because our ceiling is too low. We can't fit it. I'd love to have a Stairmaster. And a rowing machine, too. That would be cool. A rowing machine. We have a gym downstairs in our basement with weights, a universal, free weights, a treadmill, bicycle. My wife has been using it for about 20 years now. That's our personal gym. So again, when you lift weights and you gain muscle, you increase the number of myofibrils. Each myofibrils has thin filaments and thick filaments. The thin filaments are made of actin. The thick filaments are made of myosin. You'll see what that looks like in a second. Here's the thin filaments. Here's the thick filaments. Just like it sounds, thick filament is thicker than the thin filaments. Here's the myofibrils. Here's the T-tubules. Notice they go all the way around each myofibril. This is a myofibril here. These are all myofibrils. Notice the thin filaments and the thick filaments here. Sarcomeres are the smallest functional units of muscle fiber. Their interaction between the filaments produce contraction. Arrangement of filaments accounts for the striated pattern of myofibrils. The dark bands are called A bands. The light bands are called I bands. There's something called the M line. It's in the center of an A band. Did you guys study this in lab? No. Okay, not yet. Proteins stabilize the position of thick filaments, the M line. The H band is on either side of the M line. It has thick filaments but no thin filaments. The zone of overlap is the dark region where thick and thin filaments overlap. Blah, blah, blah. You probably have no idea what I'm talking about. No, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. I'll show you a picture in a second. The I band contains thin filaments but no thick filaments. Z lines look like the letter Z repeated. It bisects, it cuts in half the I bands. It marks the boundaries between adjacent sarcomeres. Titin is an elastic protein that looks like a spring. It extends from the tip of the thick filament to the Z line. It keeps filaments in proper alignment, and it aids in restoring resting sarcomere length. So here's the Z line here. Looks like the letter Z. Here's the A band, this dark band. This is the H band, where there is no thin filament, just thick filament. This is the M line. This is the I band. And the titin is this green spring-like thing that attaches the thick filament to the Z lines. Now, one Z line to the next Z line is called a sarcomere, and it's a unit of contraction. You should know that for the test. What a sarcomere is. It's a unit of contraction from one Z line to the next. You should know what the I band is. It's the light band. The A band is the dark band. This is a light microscope view of skeletal muscle. You can see the A band here. You can see the I band with the Z line in the center. You can see the M line and the H band. So this really does exist. We're not making this up. So a skeletal muscle is surrounded by epimysium. It contains muscle fascicles, which are bundles of muscle fibers. The muscle fascicle is surrounded by perimysium, which has the muscle fibers. Each muscle fiber is surrounded by endomysium, which has the myofibrils inside.
9 p.m.
That's 9 p.m. The myofibrils have the thin and thick filaments. What are these three things called?
Which three? The first three?
These three.
The something with a T.
Triad, right, the triad. Terminal cisternae on either side of a T-tubule. And this is the dark band, the A band. This is the I band, the light band. This is the Z line. This is the M line down the middle. This is the H band, where there's no thin filament, just thick filament. Thin filaments contain what's called F-actin, nebulin, which sounds nebulous, tropomyosin, and troponin proteins. Filamentous actin, F-actin, is like a twisted strand of pearls that is made up of G-actin molecules. The active sites on the G-actin bind to myosin, the thick filament. So the thin filament is on the actin, the thick filament is the myosin. Nebulin, another nebulous sounding thing, holds the F-actin together. Thin filaments continue. The tropomyosin covers the active sites on G-actin. It prevents actin and myosin binding together. Troponin is a globular protein that binds tropomyosin, G-actin, and calcium. You'll see what it does in a moment. So this is titin, the Z line, the actin. This is an F-actin strand. It's a helical structure, a double helix like DNA, and it has tropomyosin and troponin. Troponin binds to the tropomyosin. When calcium binds to troponin, it moves the tropomyosin out of the way of the binding sites that will bind the thick filament. You'll see what that looks like in a second. The thick filaments contain about 300 myosin molecules. Each myosin molecule consists of a tail which binds to other myosin molecules, and a head made up of two globular protein subunits, and they project toward the nearest thin filament. A core of titin recoils after stretching. So it looks like a golf club. Look what it looks like. It looks like a golf club, right? And it has a hinge to allow this myosin head to bend and contract When it does that, it pulls the thin filament closer to the center when that myosin head contracts. It's triggered by ADP. So a bunch of myosin clubs or tails are here, and their heads stick out. The sliding filament theory, it is a theory, but it has a lot of proof. During a contraction, the H bands and the I bands narrow, the zones of overlap widen, the Z lines move closer together, the width of the A band remains constant, thus the thin filaments must slide towards the center of the sarcomere. Let's look what it looks like. Now, this is a relaxed sarcomere. Notice the H band. Notice the I band, the Z line. Notice the A band. Now, look what happens when the muscle contracts. What happens to the I band?
Gets shorter.
It shrinks, right? What happens to the H band?
Gets shorter as well.
It gets shorter. What happens to the Z lines?
Same. Shorter.
They get closer together, right? What happens to the A band?
Stays the same.
Stays the same, right? Very good.
So the Z band gets, I'm sorry, what did you say about the Z band?
The Z lines
Sorry,
get
Z
closer together. The I bands become smaller. The H band becomes smaller with contraction. And notice what happens to the thin filaments. Notice where they are right here, about halfway up the myosin filament. Look where they are now. They're closer to the center. They're closer to the M line. Excitable membranes are found in skeletal muscle fibers and neurons. Depolarization and repolarization events produce action potentials, again, electrical impulses. Skeletal muscle fibers contract due to stimulation by motor neurons, which are nerves. The neuromuscular junction is a synapse between a nerve cell and a skeletal muscle fiber. The axon terminal of the motor neuron releases a neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. The neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. Now, acetylcholine is released by exocytosis. It's released from the axon terminal by exocytosis. Acetylcholine binds to a chemically gated sodium channel on the muscle fiber. It opens the sodium channel, allows sodium to come in, and depolarizes the motor end plate. Starts an electrical impulse. Let's see what that looks like. These are the vesicles of acetylcholine. These are the receptors, acetylcholine receptors. Watch what happens when the electrical impulse, the action potential, comes down the axon terminal. Watch closely to what happens to the vesicles. They release the acetylcholine by exocytosis, and watch what happens to the acetylcholine. It binds to the chemically gated channel that allows sodium to come in. When enough sodium has come in, it starts an electrical impulse. It starts what's called an action potential. When enough sodium comes in. Look what happens after a while. This yellow crescent is acetylcholinesterase. It's an enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine so that it doesn't stay bound to the acetylcholine receptor. It breaks it down into acetate and choline. Excitation, contraction, coupling. Action potentials travel down the T-tubules to the triads. Calcium is released from the terminal cisternae of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium binds to troponin and changes its shape. The troponin-tropomyosin complex changes position and exposes active sites on the thin filaments. Contraction cycle is initiated. So neural control, the skeletal muscle fiber contracts when a motor neuron stimulates an action potential at the axon terminal. Excitation, the action potential releases acetylcholine into what's called the synaptic cleft. I didn't explain what the synaptic cleft is. This is the synaptic cleft. It's like a Grand Canyon between the muscle and the neuron. There's a little Grand Canyon. They're not actually attached. There's space between the muscle and the neuron. And the acetylcholine will cross that space.
Is the sarcolemma the same as the...
Is what?
Is that the same as the sarcolemma? No.
It is the sarcolemma.
It is the sarcolemma?
Yes.
Okay.
So when the action potential reaches the sarcolemma, the action potential travels down the T-tubules, along the sarcolemma, down the T-tubules, and it triggers the release of calcium from the terminal cisternae of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The contraction cycle begins when calcium binds to troponin, resulting in the exposure. Let me make this bigger, it's hard to read. This allows cross-bridge formation, which will continue as long as ATP is available. Now, I promised you a couple of lectures ago why ATP is needed for mitosis. Did anybody look it up? Why is ATP needed for mitosis? Something has to move the chromosomes apart. That is motor proteins that run on ATP. They're like little locomotives that help separate the chromosomes. That's where ATP comes in. Sarcomere shortening, as the thick and thin filaments interact, the sarcomeres shorten, pulling the ends of the muscle fibers closer together. Generation of muscle tension. During the contraction, the entire skeletal muscle shortens and produces a pull or tension on the tendons on either end. Contraction cycle begins. Active site exposure occurs. Cross-bridge formation, that's when myosin binds to actin. Myosin head pivots the power stroke. Remember I showed you that hinge where the head of the myosin bends in a certain direction? That's called a power stroke. Cross-bridge detachment and myosin reactivation is recocked again. So here is tropomyosin, troponin, the myosin head, which has ADP and phosphate. Here's calcium. Here's the little hinge that I was talking about. When calcium binds to the troponin, here you can see calcium binding troponin, it opens up the binding sites on the actin so that the myosin heads can attach and form a cross bridge. So you notice they look like olives, like cocktail olives or pitted olives. These are the binding sites that the myosin heads bind to. And that only occurs when calcium binds to troponin and moves the tropomyosin out of the way of the binding sites. Once the binding sites are open, the myosin head can attach to the actin binding site, and the power stroke occurs. ADP and phosphate are released. That power stroke moves the actin closer to the center, towards the end line, and the H band gets smaller. ATP is needed to detach the myosin head from the actin binding site. So you need ATP. Now you've heard of rigor mortis. What is rigor mortis? A lucky stiff, right?
Constricted muscle.
It's tightening of the muscles after death. Usually occurs 2 to 4 hours after death. Do you ever wonder why they close people's eyes when they die? Because if they didn't, their eyes would stay open. Rigor mortis would occur in the eyelids, and they would stay open. So rigor mortis occurs when there is a lack of ATP, and the muscle can't relax. It can't disconnect from this state. It stays attached to the actin binding site, and it produces stiffness, rigor mortis. Now, rigor mortis goes away in 24 to 48 hours, so it's not a permanent condition, rigor mortis. Myosin reactivation. Notice the myosin head, when ATP is bound, it separates from the actin binding site. Look what happens when you break down ATP. Watch the myosin head. Look what it did. It recocked back into the resting position, where it can then bind to the actin site and pull the actin filament closer to the center. So this is a resting sarcomere. This is a contracting sarcomere. Generation of muscle tension. When muscle cells contract, they produce tension or pull. To produce movement, tension must overcome the load or the resistance. The entire muscle shortens at the same rate because all the sarcomeres contract together. The speed of shortening depends on the cycling rate, which is the number of power strokes per second. The duration of a contraction depends on the duration of the neural stimulus, the electrical impulse, the presence of free calcium ions in the cytosol, and the availability of ATP. As calcium is pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum and calcium concentration in the cytosol falls, calcium detaches from troponin. Troponin returns to the original position, and the active sites are recovered by tropomyosin, and the contraction ends. Everybody follow that? It's a little complicated. Rigor mortis is fixed muscular contraction after death. It occurs when ATP runs out and ion pumps cease to function. Calcium ions build up in the cytosol, and you can't relax the muscle because the calcium remains bound to the troponin. I'm going to skip the slide. It's too busy. It's too busy. The number of contracting sarcomeres in a muscle fiber is fixed. So a muscle fiber is either producing tension or relaxed. The amount of tension produced depends on the number of power strokes performed, the fiber's resting length at the time of stimulation, and the frequency of stimulation. We'll see what that means in just a second. There's something called the length-tension relationship. The tension produced by a muscle fiber relates to the length of the sarcomere. The amount of tension produced depends on the number of power strokes performed by cross bridges and the amount of overlap between thick and thin filaments. Maximum tension is produced when there is the maximum number of cross bridges formed. It occurs when the zone of overlap is large. So In this case, maximum tension, this is tension on the side here, is produced when there is a maximal overlap of actin and myosin. Now, when the thin and thick filaments come together, you have less contraction. When the thin filaments overlap each other, you have even less contractile force. If you stretch the muscle too much, notice that you lose overlap. And if you pull the muscle completely apart, there's no overlap and there's no tension. So there's an ideal amount of stretch that produces tension, an ideal amount of thick filament to thin filament overlap. Frequency of a stimulation. A single neural stimulation produces a single contraction or twitch. It lasts 7 to 100 milliseconds. Sustained muscle contractions require many repeated stimuli. A myogram is a graph that shows tension development in muscle fibers. You've heard of an electrocardiogram. A myogram is something that shows muscular contractions. A single twitch has 3 phases. The latent period, where the action potential moves across the sarcolemma, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum releases calcium ions. The contraction phase, calcium ions bind to troponin and cross bridges form. Tension builds to a peak. The relaxation phase, calcium levels in the cytosol fall, cross bridges detach, and tension decreases. So this is a myogram from various muscles. The eye muscle here is shown here. This is the twitch from the gastrocnemius. Where's the gastrocnemius? Did you study that yet? No. It's your calf muscles. The soleus is underneath the gastrocnemius. So this is no contraction, the resting phase. This is the latent period when the electrical impulse causes the release of calcium. Calcium binds to troponin and cross bridges form, and this is the contraction phase. Maximum tension develops here. The relaxation phase is when calcium is pumped back in to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, all pumps require ATP. So the calcium pump is no exception to that. So ATP is used to pump calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. TREP is a stair-step increase in tension. It's caused by repeated stimulations immediately after the relaxation phase. The stimulus frequency is less than 50 times per second. It produces a series of contractions with increasing tension. Now, this is wrong. It says it's typically seen in cardiac muscle, not skeletal muscle. It's the other way around. You see it in skeletal muscle, but you don't see it in cardiac muscle. You'll see what that looks like in a second. Wave summation is increasing tension due to summation of twitches. It's caused by repeated stimulation before the end of the relaxation phase. The stimulus frequency is greater than 50 times per second. So this is TREP. If you keep stimulating after relaxation, the tension increases every time you stimulate. Now, wave summation, if you will stimulate the muscle before it has a chance to fully relax, you have this staircase phenomenon. Incomplete tetanus is muscle that produces near maximum tension. It's caused by rapid cycles of contraction and relaxation. Complete tetanus is a higher stimulation frequency that totally eliminates the relaxation phase. And the muscle is in continuous contraction, all potential cross bridges form. Now, what is tetanus known as? When someone catches tetanus and you get a tetanus vaccine, what is tetanus known as? What's the common name for tetanus? Lockjaw. Lockjaw. It causes the muscles to contract, especially in the jaw, which would be a good way to die. Keep la bouche closed. So this is incomplete tetanus. The frequency is such that you don't have relaxation. So this is the step phenomenon, and it reaches a maximum level of tension. This is complete tetanus. This is the frequency is so frequent that you don't allow any relaxation to occur. And you reach a peak, a plateau, where you can't stimulate any more muscle contraction. Now, as soon as you stop stimulating, the muscle will relax again. So you see the difference between incomplete tetanus. It doesn't reach the maximum tension that tetanus reaches. And in the case of tetanus, there's no relaxation allowed. Like when you take a test, there's no relaxation allowed. Tension produced by skeletal muscles depends on the number of stimulated muscle fibers. Now, somebody asked earlier, is there a set number of muscle fibers? It varies from individual to individual, but in smaller muscles, there's less muscle fibers. In larger muscles, there's more. And the tension produced depends on the number of stimulated muscle fibers. A motor unit is a motor neuron, a nerve cell, and all the muscle fibers that it controls. It may contain a few muscle fibers or thousands of muscle fibers. All the fibers in a motor unit contract at the same time. Fasciculation is an involuntary muscle twitch. Unlike a true twitch, it involves more than one muscle. Has anybody ever had a muscle twitch in their eye? That's kind of annoying, right? I hate when that happens. Recruitment is an increase in the number of active motor units. It produces a smooth, steady increase in tension. Maximum tension is achieved when all the motor units reach complete tetanus, and it can be sustained for a very short time. Sustained contractions produce less than maximum tension. Motor units are allowed to rest in rotation. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Right? You're probably thinking. So this is the spinal cord here. And these are motor neurons. These are the axons of motor neurons. You notice there's a red one, a blue one, and a purple one. This is a motor unit. All the red muscle fibers are attached to one motor neuron. All the blue muscle fibers are attached to the blue motor neuron. Now, whenever the blue motor neuron fires, it causes all the blue muscle fibers to contract at the same time. When the red motor neuron contracts or stimulates the muscle, all the red muscle fibers contract at the same time. Now, there's something called recruitment, where you can increase the number of muscle fibers that are recruited. For example, if I lift this little change purse, it doesn't take a lot of muscle. But if I lift my 100-pound book bag here, it takes a lot more muscle. I recruit more motor units to lift this bag. It's pretty heavy. You should check it out. So there's a video that explains this better than I can. These are motor units that are firing, and they produce tension. Notice that they take turns contracting. and they produce a smooth muscle twitch. Okay, Smart Art video. Another Smart Art video.
Welcome to another Anatomy and Physiology Smart Art video, where we guide you through an important piece of art. After watching this video, you should be able to define a motor unit and describe the process of recruitment and generating varying levels of muscular tension. Let's begin by looking at this image here, where we see a muscle from the arm with its individual motor units color-coded as purple, blue, or red. Recall that a motor unit consists of a motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it controls. The cell bodies of these motor neurons reside here in the spinal cord, and here we see the muscle fibers that they control. The purple motor neuron controls only the purple muscle fibers. The blue motor neuron controls only the blue fibers, and the red only the red. The axons of these three motor neurons are bundled together to form the motor nerve that controls this particular skeletal muscle. The number of fibers in a particular motor unit indicates how fine or precise that motor unit is. The precise control of eye movements is achieved by motor units with only 4 to 6 muscle fibers, while the more gross or larger movements of our limbs may be controlled by motor units with 1 to 2,000 fibers.
What is this muscle here? Did you study it?
We didn't study any of the
Didn't study the, like, this is the sartorius muscle. This is the longest muscle in the body, the sartorius. This is the quadriceps muscle, the quads. You'll study that. Oh, I just goofed.
Welcome to individual motor units. Recall, neuron, and all the muscle fibers, the cell bodies of these motor neurons. And here we see the muscle fibers in control. The purple muscle fibers, the blue motor neuron fibers, and the red, only the red. The axons of these three motor neurons are bundled together to form the motor nerve that controls this particular skeletal muscle. The number of fibers in a particular motor unit indicates how fine or precise that motor unit is. The precise control of eye movements is achieved by motor units with only 4 to 6 muscle fibers, while the more gross or larger movements of our limbs may be controlled by motor units with 1 to 2,000 fibers. To achieve a smooth and steady increase in muscular tension, you progressively recruit more motor units. Recruitment begins by first activating small motor units and continues by progressively involving larger motor units with faster and more powerful muscle fibers. For instance, compare lifting a cup of coffee to lifting a heavy dumbbell. Lifting the coffee requires precision, so just a few motor units and therefore relatively few muscle fibers are involved. Lifting the dumbbell, however, requires maximal tension. Many more motor units must be recruited to involve
Just a sidebar. Some of you, when you go to Starbucks, order a drink that's bigger than your head. And it's got whipped cream in it. I'm envious of that. I can't have something like that. It would go to my delicate race line.
maximum number of muscle fibers and generate as much tension as possible. This image uses the same color key to distinguish our three motor units and demonstrates how during sustained contractions, motor units take turns, allowing some to rest while others actively contract. This relay team approach is called asynchronous motor unit summation. You subconsciously gauge the amount of motor units needed to do a job, but sometimes you get fooled. Have you ever reached into the refrigerator to grab a gallon of milk you thought was full, but was actually empty? You lift the empty container too forcefully, not because your muscle fibers contract more forcefully, but because you recruit more motor units than needed. To summarize, a motor unit is a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it controls. Motor units vary from just a few fibers, as in the muscles controlling fine eye movements, to several thousand fibers, as in the limbs. Recruitment is the process of progressively involving more motor units to achieve a smooth and steady increase in tension, and begins by first recruiting small motor units, followed by larger and more powerful motor units. So what? Why is it important to understand a motor unit in the process of recruitment? Well, this helps you understand the complexity of human movement. For example, This is one of the reasons why your muscles become stronger when you lift weights at the gym. Lifting progressively heavier weights trains a muscle to recruit more motor units. As more motor units become involved in a movement, the greater the tension generated by that muscle. You see the results as increased strength.
So what?
So the fibers don't increase, but the motor units do.
Yeah, and the myofibrils increase. Right. And the mitochondria increase, and the glycogen stores increase. Muscle tone is the normal tension and firmness of a muscle at rest. Without causing movement, motor units are actively stabilize the position of bones and joints, and they maintain balance and posture. Now, I'm standing up here, and you probably notice me shifting my weight. I'm taking turns on my muscles, so I don't get fatigued. I don't fatigue any one muscle. So I'm moving around. So just in case you wonder why am I moving around, it's not a crazy dance. I'm trying to make sure I don't fatigue my muscles, because I tend to get back pain. That's why I started to work out, to help my back pain. I have arthritis in the spine. Elevated muscle tone increases resting energy consumption. Types of muscle contractions. Contractions are classified based on their pattern of tension production. It can either be isotonic or isometric exercise. Have you ever heard of isometric exercises? What is an isometric exercise?
It's when you're kind of in the same position but your muscles contracted.
Right, exactly. There's no change in the length. So the muscles are contracting, but there's no change in length. So this would be an isometric exercise. I'm pressing against the door jamb here. I'm contracting my muscles, but it's not doing anything. It's not changing the length of the muscle. So that's an isometric exercise. An isotonic exercise is one that the muscle changes in length. Now, in isotonic, there's a change in the length, resulting in motion. There's isotonic concentric contraction, where the muscle shortens, and isotonic eccentric contraction, where the muscle elongates. So this is isotonic concentric contraction. The muscle shortens. This would be isotonic eccentric contraction. I'm still contracting my muscle, but the muscle is getting longer. As I'm putting this down, the muscle gets longer. I'm still contracting muscle, though. One is shortening the muscle, and one elongates the muscle. We're going to skip this because it's kind of boring. Isometric contraction, skeletal muscle develops tension that never exceeds the load. The muscles do not change in length. What type of exercise do you think astronauts perform in space? Isotonic or isometric exercises? Isometric, right, because there's no gravity to lift weights or anything. Everything is weightless. So you can't lift dumbbells in space. They're just very heavy dumbbells you can lift easily without any gravity. So you have to have isometric exercises to keep the muscles strong. This is kind of boring. Load and speed of contraction are inversely related. This is intuitive. The heavier the load, the longer it takes for the movement to begin. Tension must exceed the load before shortening can occur. So a light load, muscle contraction occurs relatively early. A heavier load, it takes a little while longer for the muscle to contract. And a very heavy load, it takes even longer for the muscle to contract. So you see, The lighter the load, the faster the muscle contracts. This is time at the bottom. Kind of makes sense. Muscle relaxation and the return to resting length. Elastic forces. Tendons recoil after a contraction. It helps return muscle fibers to a resting length. Opposing muscle contractions, opposing muscles return a muscle to the resting length quickly. Gravity assists opposing muscles. Let's take a 10-minute break because we're going to talk about ATP and that always puts me to sleep. So we're going to wake up a little bit. 10-minute break. Eating and it's a delicacy, and if it's not done right by the chef, it's like Russian roulette. You could die.
So consumption of even
An
a few
anxiety.
drops of pure blood can be lethal.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much?
A few drops of eel blood.
Why do they bother doing it?
Then why do they make you eat it?
You cook it, it's fine. I don't know.
How many times did they do that to have to figure that out? Like, cook it a little more. That one died too. Like, that's so crazy.
So-
One drop, two drops.
That's so crazy.
Let's talk about ATP. It's adenosine triphosphate. It's the only energy source used directly for muscle contraction. And contracting muscles use a lot of ATP. Muscles store enough ATP to start a contraction, but more ATP must be generated to sustain a contraction. At rest, skeletal muscle fibers produce more ATP than needed. The ATP transfers energy to what's called creatine, creating creatine phosphate. It's used to store energy and convert ADP back to ATP. The enzyme creatine kinase catalyzes the conversion of ATP to ATP using the energy stored in creatine phosphate. When creatine phosphate is used up, other mechanisms are used to generate ATP, like glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. We'll talk about those in a second. ATP is generated by direct phosphorylation of ADP by creatine phosphate, anaerobic metabolism, which is known as glycolysis, aerobic metabolism, which is known as the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. Glycolysis is an anaerobic process. What does that mean, anaerobic? What is aerobic exercise? Requires oxygen. Aerobic. Anaerobic doesn't require oxygen. It's an important energy source for peak muscular activity. It breaks down glucose from glycogen stored in skeletal muscle, and it produces 2 ATP per molecule of glucose. Aerobic metabolism is the primary energy source of resting muscles. It breaks down fatty acids and glucose metabolites called pyruvate. Muscle metabolism. Skeletal muscles at rest metabolize fatty acids and store glycogen and creatine phosphate. During moderate activity, muscles generate ATP through aerobic breakdown of glucose, primarily. At peak activity, pyruvate produced by glycolysis is converted to lactate. Has anybody ever done an exercise and you get a burn? Let's say you do too many dumbbell, what are they called? What are these?
Curl.
And your biceps start to burn. That's from lactic acid buildup. That's the burn. Lactic acid.
Is there something that reverses that?
Yeah, when you rest, the lactic acid goes to your liver and it's converted back to glucose. It's called the Cori cycle. Now I'm going to skip this because the Smart Art video goes through it better than I could do it.
Welcome to another Anatomy and Physiology Smart Art video, where we guide you through an important piece of iron. After watching this video, you should be able to describe how skeletal muscle fibers obtain the energy to power contractions. Let's begin by looking at this summary image. ATP, shown in bright yellow to indicate energy, is our energy currency fueling muscle activity and is generated in two ways, by glycolysis and aerobic metabolism. Let's start at the top with glycolysis. Here we see glucose entering the process. Lysis means to loosen or unbind, and the process of glycolysis unbinds or breaks down glucose into pyruvate. In glycolysis, each molecule of glucose yields 2 ATP molecules, as well as 2 pyruvate molecules. This process is anaerobic, meaning without oxygen, and occurs in the cytosol. Now, let's follow the pyruvate into the mitochondria, where it undergoes aerobic metabolism. In aerobic conditions, meaning with oxygen, these pyruvate molecules are absorbed into the mitochondrial matrix and enter the citric acid cycle. The citric acid cycle yields carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions engage in the electron transport chain, which requires ADP and phosphate, as well as oxygen, forming water and yielding many ATP molecules. Let's compare the two mechanisms of energy production. Glycolysis produces only 2 ATP molecules per glucose molecule, while aerobic metabolism extracts energy from the 2 resulting pyruvate molecules to generate an additional 30 ATP molecules. Notice how that difference is indicated. The ATP from aerobic metabolism is drawn bolder than the ATP from glycolysis. Let's now look at this image illustrating resting muscle with blood vessels delivering fatty acids, oxygen, and glucose. At rest, oxygen is plentiful. Aerobic metabolism proceeds within the mitochondria and abundant ATP is produced. Surplus ATP combines with creatine, forming the high-energy compound creatine phosphate, or CP, and ATP is also used to convert absorbed glucose into glycogen. At moderate activity levels, as ATP demand increases, stored glycogen is converted back to glucose and then pyruvate. The pyruvate enters the mitochondria, where it undergoes aerobic metabolism, generating ATP. Oxygen and fatty acid levels are sufficient for aerobic metabolism, producing ample ATP to meet demand for muscle contraction. This is what occurs as you jog on the treadmill for 45 minutes. At peak activity levels, during a 40-yard sprint, for example, ATP demand is enormous, and the mitochondria cannot absorb oxygen rapidly enough to meet the demand. So, glycolysis is the only pathway producing ATP, and stored CP is quickly depleted. Pyruvate and hydrogen ions accumulate within the cytosol, resulting in lactic acidosis, causing the muscle to fatigue. In summary, ATP is produced by 2 processes. The first is glycolysis, an anaerobic pathway that produces 2 ATP molecules and 2 pyruvate molecules per glucose molecule. The second is aerobic metabolism, in which mitochondria absorb pyruvate, oxygen, and other substances to generate 30 ATP molecules. Aerobic metabolism produces the vast majority of the ATP we need at rest and during moderate activity. So what? Why is it important to understand how muscle fibers generate the ATP required for contraction? Well, this knowledge is crucial for understanding exercise physiology. Aerobic exercise, such as running, cycling, and swimming, triggers our blood to carry more oxygen by increasing red blood cell count, and our muscles to store more oxygen and myoglobin, a protein similar to the hemoglobin that carries oxygen in blood. Exercise also increases glycogen content and the number of mitochondria in muscle. The result is an ability to produce more ATP when demands are high. You see this as better performance in your distance running and as greater availability of energy during all of your activities. However, these physiological gains can be reversed if you then become sedentary, and is one reason why exercise is recommended for a lifetime.
Is anybody here a couch potato? Yeah, you're honest. You're honest. Right? You watch Grey's Anatomy on the sofa, right? You binge watch it.
Yes. I haven't in a while, but it's a good one.
It's been a while.
I don't know, feel like as a doctor, I don't know, I feel like you'll probably definitely have things to comment on.
Pick on.
Yeah, exactly.
I liked ER better.
Yeah.
I feel like
I thought it was a better show.
It's definitely like a drama more so. I would say Grey's Anatomy, like really,
Definitely,
you know,
yeah,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
sounds gory and
Anybody see The Pit?
yes,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So good.
It's a little dark.
What is the
It's
pit?
it's very like ER centered, so
Yes.
like traumas and
Yes.
goriness and
Yes.
I was really into it.
Yeah. The recovery period is the time required after exertion for the muscles to return to normal. Lactate removal and recycling is called the Cori cycle. Lactic acid is transferred from muscles to the liver, and the liver converts lactate to pyruvate. Most pyruvate molecules are converted to glucose, and glucose is used to rebuild glycogen reserves in muscle cells. What is glycogen?
No, it's glucose. Is it a sugar or?
It's glucose strung together. It's like branches of glucose. So it's the storage form of glucose, glycogen. Oxygen debt is also called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. After exercise or other exertion, the body needs more oxygen than usual to normalize metabolic activities. Breathing rate and depth are increased. Heat production and loss. Active skeletal muscles produce heat. It releases up to 85% of the heat needed to maintain normal body temperature. So 85% of your body temperature comes from your muscles. The other 15% comes from your blood flow. Hormones and muscle metabolism. Several hormones increase metabolic activities in skeletal muscle. Growth hormone, which we know about. Testosterone, which I'm taking testosterone. No, I'm not taking testosterone. Thyroid hormones and epinephrine. What is epinephrine? What's another name for epinephrine? Adrenaline, right, because it comes from the adrenal gland. Muscle performance. Force is the maximum amount of tension produced. Endurance is the amount of time an activity can be sustained. Force and endurance depend on the types of muscle fibers and physical conditioning. There's 3 types of skeletal muscle fibers: fast fibers, slow fibers, and intermediate fibers. And special needs fibers. No, there's no special needs fibers. I just made that up. Fast fibers, the majority of skeletal muscle fibers, contract very quickly. They have a large diameter, and they have large glycogen reserves. They have few mitochondria, and they produce strong contractions but fatigue quickly. Slow fibers are slow to contract and slow to fatigue. They have smaller diameter, numerous mitochondria, high oxygen supply from extensive capillary network, and they contain myoglobin, the red pigment that binds oxygen. Now, myoglobin is found in marine mammals that dive to the bottom of the ocean, like whales. Whales have a lot of myoglobin, and it stores oxygen so they can stay below the water for like 45 minutes to an hour underwater without breathing. Their heart rate can go down to 3 beats per minute. A whale in the water, in the deepest part of the water. So these are slow fibers. They're smaller and they're darker. These are fast fibers. They're larger and they're wider. Now, chicken legs are darker than chicken breasts, which are lighter. Chicken breasts are fast fibers. Chicken legs are slow fibers. Intermediate fibers are mid-sized. They have little myoglobin. They're slower to fatigue than fast fibers. Muscle performance and the distribution of muscle fibers. White muscles mostly fast fibers like chicken breast, is pale. Red muscle, mostly slow fibers like dark meat in chicken legs or turkey legs. Most human muscles contain a mixture of fiber types and are pink. Now, long-distance runners would have more slow fibers. Sprinters would have more fast fibers. Muscle hypertrophy. Muscle growth from heavy training that causes an increase in the diameter of muscle fibers, the number of myofibrils, the number of mitochondria, glycogen reserves. Muscle atrophy is the reduction of muscle size, tone, and power due to a lack of activity. Changes in muscle tissue as we age. Skeletal muscle fibers become smaller in diameter. Skeletal muscles become less elastic. Fibrosis, there's an increase in fibrous connective tissue. What's another name for fibrosis? What's like the common name for fibrosis? Scarring. Fibrosis is just another word for scarring, scar tissue. Tolerance for exercise decreases. The ability to recover from muscular injury decreases. Takes longer to heal from a muscle injury. Muscle fatigue is when muscles can no longer perform at required level, they are fatigued. It's correlated with a depletion of metabolic reserves, damage to the sarcolemma and sarcoplasmic reticulum, a decline in pH from lactic acid buildup, which affects calcium ion binding and alters enzyme activities, and weariness due to low blood pH and pain. So there's a mental part to it as well. You just feel tired, you don't want to do it anymore, and you have to work through it. Physical conditioning improves power and endurance. Anaerobic endurance, like the 50-meter dash weightlifting, uses fast fibers and stimulates hypertrophy, improved by frequent, brief, intensive workouts. Aerobic endurance, prolonged activity, is supported by mitochondria. It doesn't stimulate muscle hypertrophy, and training involves sustained low levels of activity. You notice most long-distance runners are pretty thin, and their muscles aren't like muscle-bound, like weightlifters. And you have some runners that run 100 miles. I can't imagine even running 5 miles. They run 100 miles. And they bicycle for 500 miles. I once bicycled from Philadelphia to Atlantic City. And it was, I think, 75 miles. It was for multiple sclerosis. The effects of training, improvements in aerobic endurance result from alterations in the characteristics of muscle fibers, improvements in cardiovascular performance. Cardiac muscle tissue, cardiac muscle cells are found only in the heart. They have excitable membranes. They're also striated, just like skeletal muscle cells, but they're different than skeletal muscle because they're small. They're not 30 centimeters long. They're typically branched with a single nucleus, not multinucleated. They have short, wide T-tubules. What is T-tubules? What does T stand for? Transverse. Transverse tubules. There's no triads. They have sarcoplasmic reticulum with no terminal cisternae. They're almost totally dependent on aerobic metabolism. Contains lots of myoglobin and many mitochondria. They contact each other via intercalated discs. Intercalated discs are specialized connections. They join sarcolemmas of adjacent cardiac muscle cells by gap junctions and desmosomes. Functions include stabilizing the positions of adjacent cells, maintaining a three-dimensional structure of tissue and allowing ions to move from one cell to another so cardiac muscle cells can beat in rhythm. It allows sodium ions to move from one cell to the other rapidly to conduct an electrical impulse. So this is a light micrograph of cardiac tissue. Notice it's striated, it's hard to see. These are the intercalated discs. And there's one nucleus per cell. This is the intercalated disc section. These are mitochondria. And this is the nucleus of a cardiac cell. This is an individual cardiac cell. Notice the T-tubule. There's no terminal cistern, it's just sarcoplasmic reticulum. And here's the mitochondrion. Gap junctions are pores that allow ions like sodium to pass through from one cell to the other rapidly. Desmosomes are like Velcro that stick the cells together, and these are tight junctions. Functional characteristics of cardiac muscle: automaticity, contraction without neural stimulation, controlled by pacemaker cells. One of my friends, he just turned 85, and he had his pacemaker replaced today. And he's had it for 10 years. Now you got to wonder, how does a battery last 10 years in a pacemaker this small? It's amazing.
My uncle's battery died, and he just didn't need it anymore.
He didn't need it?
He realized it had been dead when they interrogated it. They realized it had been dead for like 4 years. And that's when they just told him he doesn't need it anymore.
Oh, wow.
That's so weird.
That's good.
Is that normal?
The nervous system can alter the pace and tension of the contractions. So, adrenaline can increase heart rate. Acetylcholine can slow down the heart rate. Contractions last 10 times longer than those in skeletal muscle, and refractory periods are longer. Wave summation and tetanic contractions are prevented due to special properties of the sarcolemma. Remember they said earlier that tetanus doesn't occur in skeletal muscle, but it occurs in cardiac muscle? It's the other way around. This tells it the right way. Smooth muscle tissue. In the integumentary system, you have the erector pili muscle, which gives you goosebumps. Cardiovascular and respiratory systems regulate blood pressure and airflow. Digestive and urinary systems form sphincters and move materials along and out of the body. The reproductive system transports gametes, or eggs, and expels the fetus. What type of muscle is the uterus made up of? It's not cardiac. Smooth muscle. Yeah, smooth muscle. Structural characteristics of smooth muscle: they're long, slender, spindle-shaped cells. They have a single central nucleus. There's no T-tubules, no myofibrils, or sarcomeres. It's non-striated muscle. Scattered thick filaments with many myosin heads. The thin filaments are attached to dense bodies. Dense bodies connect adjacent cells, transmitting contractions. There's no tendons or aponeuroses. So you'll see in the next slide, this is a longitudinal section of smooth muscle. This is a cross-section of smooth muscle. And this is a dense body. This is actin, and this is myosin. The thick lines, thick filament is myosin, and the thin filament is actin. Now, when muscle contracts, look what it does. It goes from this shape to like a towel being wrung out. So these intermediate filaments, the actin and myosin, contract, and they cause the muscle cell, the smooth muscle cell, to take on that appearance. Functional characteristics of smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle differs from other muscle tissue in excitation, contraction, coupling, length tension relationships, control of contractions, and smooth muscle tone. Excitation, contraction, coupling. Free calcium in the cytoplasm triggers contraction. Calcium binds to something called calmodulin. Instead of troponin, it binds to that protein, calmodulin. That's so annoying. It activates myosin light chain kinase, which allows the myosin heads to attach to actin. Length tension relationships. Due to the lack of sarcomeres, tension and resting length are not directly related. Even a stretched smooth muscle can contract. Plasticity is the ability to function over a wide range of lengths. For example, the urinary bladder or the stomach can expand greatly and still contract even when they're expanded greatly, as opposed to skeletal muscle, when it's expanded greatly, when it's pulled too much, it can't contract as well. Control of contractions. Multi-unit smooth muscle, innervated by motor units. Each cell may be connected to more than one motor neuron, or visceral smooth muscle cells that are not connected to motor neurons. They're arranged in sheets or layers. Rhythmic cycles of activity are controlled by pace setter cells. This is a multi-unit smooth muscle. These are varicosities that contain vesicles of neurotransmitter, and it goes across the smooth muscle. Notice the smooth muscle is long, spindle-shaped, wider at the center, and narrow at the ends. Smooth muscle tone has a normal background level of activity, and it can be decreased by neural, hormonal, or chemical factors. This is visceral smooth muscle, and that's all, folks.